Myself, Dr. Kamlesh Gakhar, Professor in Economics from Institute of Management Studies and Research, Maharishi Dayanand University, Rohtak. After having discussed national income and its related concepts, in today's lecture I am going to tell you about the national income's various concepts, or you can say the concepts of aggregates of national income or national product. The objective of this lecture is to enable you to have a clear understanding of the various concepts of national income. So, this lecture will include the explanation of gross domestic product at market price, gross national product at market price, net national product at market price, net domestic product at market price, net domestic income or net domestic product at factor cost, gross domestic product at factor cost or gross domestic income, net national product at factor cost or national income, gross national product at factor cost or gross national income, income from the net domestic product accruing to the private sector, private income, personal income, disposable income. All these we are going to discuss in this lecture. Gross domestic product at market price. It is the total market value of the final goods and services produced within the domestic territory of a country during 1 year. GDP is equal to P multiplied by Q. GDP stands for gross domestic product, P stands for market price and Q is the final goods and services. This GDP at market price is inclusive of the depreciation allowance in the consumption or the consumption of fixed capital. Value of the final goods and services produced by the normal residents as well as by non-residents within the domestic territory of a nation in an accounting year. It is calculated at the prevailing market price or current price. To avoid double counting, only final goods and services are included in GDP. Only new goods and services are considered. The value of second hand goods is not included in gross domestic product at market price. Value of financial capital like shares, bonds etc. is not a part of GDP, but commission on transactions of second hand goods and financial capital is added in GDP. Marketable goods are counted in GDP. Goods for self consumption are a part of GDP, but services for self consumption are not included in GDP. Imputed value of the free residential accommodation, food, clothing and other non-monetary benefits provided to workers and rent on self-occupied houses are included in GDP. Transfer payments, capital gains and income earned through illegal means are not included in GDP. Then we see what is gross national product at market price. The gross national product at market price is defined as the market value of the final goods and services produced in an economy during an accounting year, including net factor income from abroad. So, GNP at market price is equal to GDP at market price plus net factor income from abroad. The concept of GNP at market price is broader than GDP at market price. National product takes place in any part of the world where normal residents of the specific country work. Domestic production can be produced by the normal residents or even foreigners within the domestic territory of a country. Factor income earned from abroad is added to the GDP at market price, and factor income earned by foreigners in that country is subtracted from it. So, this was the difference between GDP at market price and GNP at market price. National product will be greater or less than domestic product if net factor income from abroad is positive or negative. If net factor income from abroad is positive, then national product will be greater, and if the net factor income from abroad is negative, then national product will be less than the domestic product. Now, what is net national product at market price? It is equal to the gross national product at market price minus the consumption of fixed capital or depreciation. It is more practical. So, NNP at market price is equal to GNP at market price minus depreciation. GNP at market price is equal to NNP at market price plus depreciation. Now, net domestic product at market price. Net domestic product at market price is the market value of final goods and services produced within the nation's borders during a given interval such as a year minus consumption of fixed capital. Net domestic product at market price is equal to net national product at market price minus net factor income from abroad. Net domestic product at market price is equal to gross domestic product at market price minus depreciation. Till now we have discussed gross domestic product at market price, gross national product at market price, net national product at market price and net domestic product at market price. Net domestic income or net domestic product at factor cost. Production is actually the result of efforts of all the factors of production. Payment made to these factors as rent, wages, interest and profit is known as factor cost, and output produced is called output at factor cost. This is also called domestic income. Net domestic product at factor cost or net domestic income includes compensation of employees. This is in the form of wages in cash or even in kind. Sometimes workers are paid in kind, like they are provided free accommodation, free transportation, free medical facilities, etc. Contribution of employers on social security on behalf of the employees like gratuity, provident fund, sickness benefit, etc. are also a part of the compensation of employees. The second component of factor income is operating surplus, that is the addition of rent, interest and profit. Rent goes for the land and is paid to the landlords, interest is for the capital and profits is the share of the entrepreneurs. Mixed income of the self-employed is also a part of the domestic income, and this mixed income, why it is called mixed? Because the self-employed persons employ their own land, labor, capital and entrepreneurship. Now, what is the difference between net domestic product at factor cost and net domestic product at market price? Net domestic product at factor cost is the total income received by the factors of production, while net domestic product is the at the market price is the market value of final production in the economy. Indirect taxes do not go to the factors of production. They are paid to the government, but they are included in the market price. Subsidies are not included in the market price, but they are the income of the factors of production. In the earlier lecture, I have told you that subsidies are the monetary help given by the government to the firms. So, net domestic product at factor cost is equal to net domestic product at market price minus indirect taxes plus subsidies. Gross domestic product at factor cost or gross domestic income. Gross domestic product at factor cost or domestic income includes compensation of employees for operating surplus and mixed income earned by the factors of production in an accounting year and depreciation or consumption of fixed capital. According to Hansen, the gross domestic product at factor cost is the sum of the net value added by all the producers in the domestic territory of the country and the consumption of fixed capital during an accounting year. Gross domestic product at factor cost is equal to net domestic product at factor cost plus depreciation. Difference between gross domestic product at factor cost and gross domestic product at market price. GDP at factor cost is equal to GDP at market price minus indirect taxes plus subsidies. Net national product at factor cost or national income. Net national product at factor cost is estimated by adding earnings of all the factors of production, wages, rent, interest and profit, and net factor income from abroad. This is also called national income. According to Dunberg, national income is the factor income accruing to the residents of a country during a year. It is the sum of domestic factor income and net factor income from abroad. So, net national product at factor cost is equal to NDP at factor cost plus net factor income from abroad. Difference between net national product at factor cost and at market price. We have already discussed it that market price includes indirect taxes which go to the government's hand and are not a part of the factor income, and excludes subsidies which go to the factors of production. So, NNP at factor cost is equal to NNP at market price minus net indirect taxes, and NNP at market price is equal to NNP at factor cost plus net indirect taxes. According to Hicks, when economic welfare is to be measured, it is more appropriate to use the concept of net national product at factor cost, and when the productivity of an economy is to be measured, then it is more appropriate to use the concept of net national product at market price. Gross national product at factor cost or gross national income. Gross national product at factor cost is equal to net national product at factor cost plus depreciation. GNP at factor cost is equal to GNP at market price minus net indirect taxes. So, dear students, till now we have discussed net domestic income or net domestic product at factor cost, gross domestic product at factor cost or gross domestic income, net national product at factor cost or national income, gross national product at factor cost. Income from the net domestic product accruing to the private sector. Private sector includes all the enterprises owned and controlled by private individuals. In government sector, all enterprises are owned and controlled by the government. The part of the net domestic product which accrues to the private sector is the income of private sector. It does not include income earned by departmental commercial enterprises of the government and savings of the non-departmental enterprises of the government. Factor income from net domestic product accruing to the private sector is equal to NDP at factor cost minus, it is minus means deduction, income from property and entrepreneurship accruing to the government minus savings of the non-departmental enterprises. Now, what is the private income? Income of the private sector earned from any source, productive or otherwise, and the retained income of the corporations is called private income. So, private income is the total of factor incomes from all the sources and current transfer payments from the government and from the rest of the world also. Private income comprises of income from domestic product accruing to the private sector, transfer earnings, undistributed profits and net factor income from abroad. If we want to derive private income from national income, we have to add current transfer earnings from the government, interest on national debt, net current transfers from the rest of the world and subtract government's income from the property and entrepreneurship and savings of non-departmental undertakings. Private income is equal to income from domestic product accruing to the private sector plus net factor income from abroad plus net transfer payments from the government and transfer payments from the rest of the world, interest on national debt. Difference between national income and private income, how they are different from each other. Private income includes the income earned in the private sector, while the national income includes the income of both private sector and public sector. National income does not include any unearned income like transfer payments, but private income includes transfer payments received from the government and from the rest of the world. Interest on national debt is a part of the private sector income, but not of national income. What is personal income? It is the sum of all incomes actually received by individuals or households during an accounting year. According to Peterson, personal income is actually the total income received by all the persons from all the sources in the form of current transfer payments as well as factor income. It is the income which actually reaches the hands of individuals. Undistributed profits retained by the firms do not accrue to the individuals. Undistributed profits comprise of corporate profit tax and corporate savings. So, corporate profit tax and corporate savings are not included in the personal income because they do not reach in the hands of individuals. So, personal income is equal to private income minus savings of the private enterprises less net retained earnings of foreign companies minus corporation tax. difference between personal income and national income. National income refers to only generated income, while personal income is the income received. Public sector income is a part of national income, but it is not a part of personal income. Transfer payments are a part of personal income, but they are not a part of national income. Undistributed profits are included in national income, but not in personal income. Interest on national debt is a component of personal income, but not of national income. Now, what is disposable income? Disposable income is that part of the personal income which the households can spend the way they like. It shows the purchasing power of the households. Disposable income is the personal income minus direct taxes and miscellaneous receipts of the government, administrative departments, fees and fines. Disposable income is equal to consumption plus saving. So, disposable income is equal to personal income minus direct taxes minus miscellaneous receipts of the government, administrative department. Now, is there any difference between personal income and disposable income? Yes, there is difference. So, what is that? The concept of personal income is wider than the concept of disposable income. Personal income is the income received by the households, whether factor income or that is transfer income. It includes direct taxes. Disposable income is that which is left with households after the payment of direct taxes and miscellaneous receipts of the government, administrative departments. So, dear students, in this lecture we have seen what is gross domestic product at market price, that is the production done within the domestic territory and calculated at the market price. Then gross national product at market price is wider as compared to GDP. It includes net factor income from abroad. Net national product at market price can be calculated if we deduct depreciation from gross national product. Then net domestic product at market price has been discussed. Net domestic income or net domestic product at factor cost is the income accruing to all factors of production. Gross at factor cost or gross domestic income. Net national product at factor cost or national income. Gross national product at factor cost or gross national income. Income from the net domestic product accruing to the private sector, what is private income, what is personal income and what is disposable income. I hope all these concepts are now clear to you. In the next lecture, we will discuss about the income and output methods of measurement of national income. Thank you.